You're welcome to First Take. I'm Jifa Bampo. Today we're going to be discussing an interesting phenomenon, no-call day. Has there ever been a time where you've not had your mobile phone with you and you felt comfortable? And have you ever been compelled to decide that today I will not be taking any phone calls? Well, that's the discussion we're having today, because a group of Ghanaians have come together to start a campaign called No Call Day, scheduled for 8th February 2022. It's part of a series of campaigns to protest the recent re-registration of SIM cards in the country, which has seen lots of queues and, for some, inhumane treatment of Ghanaians. How realistic is this? Is there another approach to dealing with the SIM card registration concerns? All that with Professor Raymond Atuguba, who is our guest on First Take. Thanks for joining us. Good day to you, Professor Atuguba, and thank you for joining us on First Take.
Thank you, Jifa, and thank you for having me.
It's been quite a while. How have you been doing?
I'm okay. You?
Doing well, teaching your students?
Yes, please.
And doing research as well.
Exactly.
You're part of a group of, concerned Ghanaians who have issues with the recent SIM card re-registration process and have decided to embark on this no-call campaign for the 8th of February. Why is this necessary at this time?
Thanks, Jifa. There are many reasons why we decided to commence the campaign called the No Call Day. For me, three of those reasons are particularly interesting. The first is that it is plain unconstitutional for any agency, any body in Ghana to attempt to collect personal data, store personal data, use it for whatever purpose, without a legislative mandate. That is because Article 18 of our Constitution guarantees for every citizen the right to privacy. So for that privacy to be infringed on, our representatives in Parliament must pass a law that mandates someone to infringe or meddle with that right. As far as I know, it's the National Identification Authority that has the legal mandate to capture such data and store it. That mandate has not legislatively been given to the telecommunications company. It has not legislatively been given even to the NCA or the NITA. The NITA, NITA, is the National Telecommunications Authority.
It's a long name. I'll get it for you.
NITA's functions do not include holding the biodata of citizens of this country. And so to say that once captured, the information would be transmitted by the telecos to NITA is an illegality. That's the first reason why we are embarking on this campaign. The second reason why we're embarking on this campaign is also based on the Constitution. If you look at Article 15 of our Constitution, it says that the dignity of all persons shall be inviolable, and no person shall be subjected to torture or other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment, or any condition that detracts or is likely to detract from his dignity and worth as a human being. I don't think that as Ghanaians we read our Constitution enough, or that we try to enforce it. The information we have from what we've seen, the manner in which the telecos are conducting the SIM registration exercise violates Article 15 of our 1992 Constitution. the treatment of people queuing sometimes in the sun, too close in proximity in COVID times, and the delays that are encountered, all infringe on the dignity of Ghanaians as enshrined in Article 15 of our Constitution. As Ghanaians, we must stop accepting mistreatment from anybody, individuals, companies, governments. We should not. When such mistreatment piles up, over time, it creates huge resentment. And then one day, boom, just happened to Burkina Faso. We don't want that in this country.
So that's the second reason.
That's the second reason.
And your final reason?
The third reason why we are embarking on this No Calls Day campaign is that we do not believe that Ghanaians have been sufficiently assured that when this data is taken by an authority other than the NIA, it will not be misused by the private actors for private commercial gain or for other nefarious activities. In today's graphic, if you look at page 45, I believe, the executive director of the Data Protection Commission has cautioned that businesses are capable of misusing data, and that her commission is set on preventing that. So
I think she mentioned that there are some 10 companies that they are looking at for how their role in handling data.
Exactly.
She wasn't very specific,
yes,
but she did mention that.
Exactly. So this concern is real because the Data Protection Commission has confirmed that it is real. So we are not satisfied that Ghanaians can go to bed and sleep when their data is with a private actor, which most probably is incentivized by the profit motive. We can't be sure that this data will not be sold and will not be otherwise misused. We need that assurance as Ghanaians before such an exercise can take place.
Before I come to nitpicking on your reasons why the group is embarking on this campaign, there's a question that has emerged on a fundamental level about the No Calls Day campaign and how realistic is it. So when we say No Calls Day, what specifically will happen?
Okay. So, Jifa, you're right. We did not come to this decision lightly as a group, as a campaign group. We know that due to digital convergence, people use their phones nowadays for literally everything communication, from emails, social media. People work from their phones. Okay.
Reporters, journalists virtually do that via their phone.
People take videos, photos, and transmit these widely using their phones. The phones are very valuable. But if Ghanaians want to be treated with dignity, if Ghanaians want to stick to the stipulations of the 1992 Constitution, there is a price to pay. And that price, we are saying, on No Calls Day, involves not receiving any call and not making any call from 6 a.m. to 12 noon. You are allowed to keep your phone on. You are allowed to do social media on your phone. But don't receive a call and don't make a call for those 6 hours.
Okay. So now there's a question. Yes. Let me just come in. There's a question about the reality of, on two levels. One, making phone calls has become part and parcel of people's everyday life. So there's that question about whether it's realistic to expect that no one will make a call or take a call. But that said, there are many others too who may not be making calls or taking calls. They spend a lot of time nonetheless on their phones, using data and paying for it. So I'm just wondering, isn't it a contradiction in terms then, where someone may not make a call or receive a call, and so no funds are expended on that level? However, people use more data probably than they make more phone calls, and so they may still be spending more on a level of data. So it seems like a contradiction and therefore unrealistic.
Thank you. So you're right and you're wrong. You're right because you would still spend money on the telecos if you use data. But you're wrong because if we did not institute the no calls day, you would be spending additional money making calls. Remember also that we have to start at a certain level and work to get pressure on the telecos to start treating Ghanaians with dignity. If after the first day, 6 a.m. to 12 noon, we see that they don't want to give, we definitely will raise the tempo. And raising the tempo may include data and ultimately shutting down our phones for specific periods of the days or for specific days in a month.
So that's why the group of concerned Ghanaians to which you belong to, the likes of Kofi Bentil, Selon Branty and Co., indicate that this is the first in a series of campaign activities.
Exactly.
Okay. Yes. Still on that issue, just a little while longer, I know that there's a communication service tax that is imposed on calls that are made. What's your expectation that the majority of Ghanaians will come on board such that obviously if there are no calls, the telcos suffer, the government also suffers because then they don't get their revenue? Or is this just for want of a better word, elite people in the middle class who are lettered and literate?
I don't think that this campaign is about the middle class. You would realize that considering the number of subscribers to mobile phones in Ghana, it just can't be the middle class that uses phones. Go to Makola and see the number of phones that people selling in the market have. Go to the farms and see people chatting with their children abroad on mobile phones. Mobile phones are ubiquitous now all over the country, and they are no longer a status symbol. Everybody, including the commonest people, use telephones. So this campaign is about them. If you look at the people who were queuing at the telecos to register, you see that they were simple people. Judging by the way they dressed, you could see that these are simple, ordinary day people who have to suffer such indignity because the telecos haven't been able to organize this in a proper way, and because they are actually acting illegally by not having the NIA have this data.
You're watching First Take here. My name is Jifa Bampo. Our guest is Professor Raymond Atuguba. He belongs to a group of concerned Ghanaians who have concerns about how the SIM re-registration process is ongoing and the legality of it. We take a break. We'll be right back. Thanks very much for joining us here on First Take. I'm Jifa Bampo. Our guest is Professor Raymond Atuguba. So, Prof, now let's go back to the earlier points you made about the reasons for the campaign. Now, you talk about the unconstitutionality of it because there is no legislative mandate that allows these private entities to collect the biodata of Ghanaians. You also refer to the inhuman treatment in the mode of collection and the other concern about how the data will be used hereafter. We are not sure whether it will be misused or it will be mined or sold off. I'll start from the second point, which is about the inhumane treatment that the group refers to. Is it just because people are queuing and there are lots of people queuing that you determine that that is inhumane? If there had been, you know, tents set up and people seated in an orderly fashion, would you call that inhumane? Or is there another way that makes it more humane to register for the process?
So there are two arguments. The first is that what they're doing is illegal and has to stop. And the second argument is what you're pointing to now, that even if you had the legislative mandate to do what you're doing, you have to do it in a way that accords with the dignity of Ghanaians. Jifa, you have seen videos, clips of how people were treated in COVID times during the registration exercise by the telecos. We shouldn't do that. I'm not saying that it's only the telecos which treat Ghanaians this way.
And I was just going to raise that because
Exactly.
people have complained about, say, embassies and high commissions engage in that. No one had really come to their aid. We saw a recent job fair where there was no process. Everyone was crowding and some even got injured. So some may ask, why should this really be any different? Maybe it's because the telcos are big, they are corporate, we can target them.
It's an entry point. We know that the telecos make a hell of money from us. They have the resources to treat people with dignity if they have the legal mandate to take their biometric and other data. They are not doing that. It means, therefore, that they are disrespecting us. That disrespect must stop.
I've heard public affairs and consumer managers at the National Communications Authority indicate that one of the reasons we tend to have a crowd at some of these centers is that people are unwilling to undertake the first point of verification on their phone. They come to the center and they want that done for them. Isn't there something to be said about us as a people also following instructions and carrying it through such that we reduce the pressure that is now evident?
Well, not exactly. It is the duty of the state institutions to whom we pay taxes to have the collection of personal data done properly. That also means that you must communicate very clearly to citizens on the processes that are used for doing it. And Jifa, we have to make a distinction between the rough, disrespectful overload of information that is thrust onto Ghanaians to imbibe and real communication to Ghanaians on matters that matter.
You feel that it's not been properly done.
Exactly.
People have not been well engaged about even that first verification process.
TV adverts, radio announcements, it's an overload of information that's different from communication. And if they just, you and a communication expert, if they just put more resources into thinking through exactly how to communicate better to citizens on how the process runs, people would not come to the registration centers unprepared. If they had a process, a workflow that allowed for pre-checks before people arrived at a certain point, and for relevant direction and information to be given at the pre-check point, you would not have the crowding. These telecos have the resources to do this when they want our money. Every 3 days or so, I receive a call from a teleco asking me to buy data. And they would call and be nice. So what we are saying is the effort, the resources you use when you are extracting money from us, we expect you to use the same resources when it comes to dealing with our welfare. And our welfare includes a decent and dignified process of registering if you have the legal mandate to conduct registration. Now
you've said this is illegal, it has to stop. I've seen a post that was put up by Dr. Poku Eduse, who is one of the legal directors at the NCA, and he says, quote, "For your information and education, the SIM registration data is not stored by any private entities. Telcos don't store the central data collected. The app developer does not store the data either. The centralized database is rather hosted by the National Information Technology Agency, NITA, and the National Data Center. NITA is a government agency duly designated in accordance with law to be the custodian of the central SIM register." And there are various legislation, some you've referred to, but of course there's the National Identity Register Act and regulations, the Data Protection Act. And I've seen NITA being referred to in this. So I'm just wondering then, if you say that this is illegal, then what is NITA violating? And what is the NCA violating, since that is what they are hinging their mandate on?
So, Jifa, you've mentioned so many things that have legal implications. Let me try and sort them out. The first is that in Ghana, we have a hierarchy of norms. And that hierarchy says that the Constitution comes first, Acts of Parliament follow, and then subsidiary legislation like CIs, constitutional instruments, legislative instruments, executive instruments, and others follow. By simply pointing to even an act of parliament and saying that the law is X, you have not done justice to an issue. You have to cross-check that that act of parliament is consistent with the 1992 Constitution. That's the first point. I have already told you that the right to privacy is enshrined in Article 18 of our Constitution. And I believe also Article 21 of the Constitution. And if you want to infringe on any of those rights, you have to be authorized by an act of parliament to do so. This brings me to the second point. The legislative mandate of NITA doesn't include the capture and storage of biometric information of citizens. That mandate has been given to a different entity called the National Identification Authority. So I do not see how it can be legal for NITA to do what it has not been legislatively set up to do. The third thing is that we shouldn't be semantic here. If you say that the telcos, which have no capacity and no legal right to collect such data, is collecting it and transmitting it to NITA, are you thereby saying that between the period of capture and the period of transmission, that information is not hosted somewhere? Do you see my point? Once you capture data, it is captured into something before it is what? Transmitted. No matter how short the period of retention is, even if it is 1 microsecond, it is what? Retention. And if you don't have the legal mandate to retain such data, you shouldn't be doing it. In our technological world, you need less than a microsecond to extract data from any place that it is temporarily stored. So even that period is risky as far as personal data is concerned.
Would it have made much of a difference if the NIA were the ones sharing this data on SIM registration with the government, with NITA? Is your main beef the fact that a third-party contractor is the one collecting this data and not the NIA?
It's not just the fact that it's a third-party contractor. The way in which the administrative law of this country works is to allow citizens to hold public entities accountable for the way and manner they do the job that we pay them to do. It is therefore difficult to hold accountable entities that are not part of the public service metrics of the country, such as the telecommunications authority. Such as the telecommunications companies. We agree that the proper authority to do this is the National Identification Authority, because we can hold it through administrative law processes to account in a way that we cannot hold the telecos to account. Additionally, once the NIA, as an administrative state institution under Article 190 of our Constitution, takes that data and even contracts with a third party to do aspects of the job that is supposed to be done, they ultimately are liable for any missteps. But where the NIA is not in the picture, it then becomes difficult to roll out the administrative mechanisms that can hold the NIA accountable for any infringements on the rights of the citizenry.
But the NIA says it is part of the picture. In a recent letter which was initially leaked, where clarity was sought about their role in the SIM registration process and in terms of even the data management and verification, later on the NIA did issue a statement saying that they support the SIM registration, that letter was issued some 3-4 months ago. As far as they are concerned, they are working together with government and the agencies involved, the Ministry of Communications and Digitalization, and they will be providing verification for this data that is collected.
Jifa, you believe that? So,
you don't?
We have a strong letter written by the head of the NIA saying effectively two things. One, that the process of SIM registration as is being conducted now is horribly legally deficient. And two, that they cannot guarantee the authenticity and integrity of the technical processes that are being used currently for SIM registration. A few months down the line, they would want us to believe that all of these two huge obstacles have been addressed and that they are now fully on board. Jifa, that's a bit difficult to believe.
Well, the statement, and I'll just read it to you. They do say they stand by their letter as being technically factual, accurate, correct, and honest.
Exactly.
However, they go on to say that the NIA fully supports the SIM card registration in the country, does not contest the mandate of MOCD, that's the Ministry of Communications and Digitalization, to implement this registration in accordance with law, and they continue to cooperate with them and the NCA. And then, for the avoidance of doubt, they are an ardent supporter of this as an important government policy. It continues with its interagency cooperation and collaboration. And so it's been evident in other instances where it worked with SNET, the NHIA, and the GRA, and the Controller's Department for all of this. And so it makes one wonder then that if you don't think much has changed, maybe they've come to a certain agreement on the way forward.
I'm saying two things. I'm saying one, that the legal and technical issues that were raised in the NIA letter are not resolvable in the space of time between that letter and the statement they issued. That's my opinion. I verily believe it. Secondly, I've worked in the public services before. And whilst I was working there, the more senior public servants taught us about statements and letters and how they are written. I'm telling you that reading that statement, the wording used in that statement reinforces my belief in the first point I just made.
That the issues have not been
that they
resolved
haven't
on
been
a
resolved.
technical level.
Should I give you an example? They start the letter by saying that they stand by, they start the announcement by saying that they stand by the contents of what?
Of the previous letter.
Exactly. That's what they taught us to do. That when you are under pressure to do something, start by saying that you stand by what you said earlier in order to protect yourself. And then everything else you say after that doesn't really matter. Because an experienced person reading it would know what you really want to say.
Now, Professor Atuguba, since you've said that this is illegal and should be stopped, I know that a citizen filed a case in court seeking that that should happen. The court did not allow for an injunction on the process. But I do understand that there will be a hearing. Certainly, we don't want to be sub judice, but I'm just wondering, if the court declined to stop the process, then it begs the question about maybe there isn't so much of an illegality. Mind you, some years back, a decision was made that the telcos will now take identity cards or registration to verify the individual seeking to withdraw money. So probably that ship has sailed. Once we allowed the telcos to begin asking us for our ID card before they allow cash out or any other transaction, then maybe that ship has sailed.
Not exactly, Jifa. There are two things. I spoke to the lawyer for the plaintiff or the applicant in this case. And if my memory serves me right, what he said was that they voluntarily withdrew the application for injunction because they had come to an agreement with the court that the main matter would be heard with expedition. That's a tactical move any lawyer would accept. If I have an application, not a writ, an application moves faster normally than a writ. And the judge said, okay, you have an injunction application also before me. If you withdraw this application, I would set a quick date for the main application to be heard. As a lawyer, I'll take that bait because the actual case, the substantive case, will be heard what? Quickly. So I do not believe that the fact that the application for injunction was withdrawn or that there is no injunction on the telecos adds fuel to the argument that the plaintiff's case is weak. No, I believe that the plaintiff has a very strong case and has very good lawyers. Secondly, as we saw in the Abu Ramadan series of cases, sometimes...
That was on the NHIA card being
exactly.
used as an identification document for registration for the elections.
Exactly. The courts have power to order a body to delete information that it holds, which the court thinks should be deleted. So if this case is heard to conclusion, one of the orders can be that the telecos are holding the biometric data of Ghanaian citizens illegally, and an order will be given to what? Have that data deleted from the systems of the telecos, and even have an IT audit post-deletion to ensure that none of that data is there. So I don't think that the case of the plaintiff is undermined by the withdrawal of the application for interim injunction.
Can someone else file any action against the Ministry of Communications and Digitalization, file any action against NITA, file any action against the NCA, separate from whether this is even a legal process and should be stopped? I think that's different from stopping the SIM card registration.
Yes, definitely. And I would urge the civil society organizations to tone down on the talking and get to action. Because we live in a very legalistic country now, where everybody is talking about the Constitution and the law. And so they have to start using legal processes in support of their advocacy. I would have wanted to see more actions in this domain. remember Pegasus, which is being used by the Israeli...
That's the spyware that
Exactly.
some countries have been accused
That
of
is
using to hack people's phones and follow their conversation.
Yes. The Israelis are using it even to spy on their own citizens. And if you remember, in the NCA cases in court, there is evidence on the court records that there was an attempt, whether successful or failed, to purchase Pegasus in Ghana. So we have to be concerned about all of these issues and what it portends for the liberty of the individual, the dignity of the individual, as guaranteed in Articles 15, 18, and 21 of our Constitution.
So just a final point on, the reasons you give about the legality and otherwise. It doesn't look like the Ministry of Communications, the NCA, and the telcos are caught in the middle, I must say, because they are like, the implementers of this policy from their mother ministry. It doesn't look like the mother ministry is backing down or the regulator is backing down. They are determined to push through with this. Whether any other approach to get them to do so, or is there anything that can make them change their minds?
Well, as citizens, all we can do is mount pressure on government and mount pressure on private actors to do what inures to our benefit. That's why we are saying we are instituting these no-call days. We would raise the tempo as the days go by in the hope that when the telcos start losing revenue and government starts losing revenue, they would see reason and return us to the path of constitutionality, the path of legality, and the path of dignity of the Ghanaian citizen.
What would you say to those who may accuse, the group of concerned Ghanaians, eminent people such as yourself, of probably seeking to sabotage what they believe is a well-intentioned government policy to prevent fraud and to prevent impersonation, duplication of people possessing, the SIM?
We have that already legislatively covered in Ghana. We have a National Identification Authority, which is mandated.
No, that's that. But the question or the concern would be, you're an eminent lawyer and academic, and so are some of the others part of the group, former members of parliament like Ras Mubarak, civil society actors like Salon Brandy and Kofi Bentel. Some the government or those players, stakeholders in this space pushing this, may see you as saboteurs to a government process. What would be your response to that? That's certainly not a tag you want.
The government is entitled to think what it wants to think. And I think that every Ghanaian should be proud to be called a saboteur. Because in cases such as this, because we know from of old that government is in the business of stretching its tentacles. It happens everywhere in the world. And it is the duty of citizens to sabotage that. Otherwise, they would stretch their tentacles so wide that they clamp on you and destroy you or kill you. So that contestation between state and citizen is not going to stop today. And the moment we give up that, we have surrendered our liberties and we stop being citizens, we become subjects.
Our guest is Professor Raymond Atuguba, and we've been speaking about the SIM re-registration exercise and a series of campaigns tagged No Call Day, which will kick off on the 8th of February. We'll be right back after this break. Thank you for staying with us here on First Take. I'm Jifa Bampo. Our guest is Professor Raymond Atuguba. Now, Prof, in terms of this whole process of the campaign, does the group have any plans to go further down to ordinary people, to the markets? Young people, you're university, lecturer, and a lot of the people who are using data making calls are young university students as well, in a bid to, whip up support for this? Otherwise, it may seem like it's just a tiny group of people.
Jifa, by the way, it's not a tiny group of people. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but the National Union of Ghana Students, for example, is in support of the call we made.
They are?
I don't know if they've made it public yet. There are many other groups that are in support of this call. And I'm sure that when the telecos do their assessment on the no calls day, that's when they'll get frightened. And we are ready to continue working with all of these groups, including grassroots groups, to make sure that what we are calling for happens.
So how do you expect a journalist like me to cover this activity on that day? Because a lot of journalists, for instance, depend on, say, live reporting. We may come to you to do an interview. We may record it via our phone to air. How do we do that if you are on a no-call campaign? How then do we tell your story?
So we decided that we would tell the story as far as using phone calls is concerned before 6 a.m. and after 12 noon. So none of us on the campaign would be making or receiving calls during the period. If there's something urgent you want to file, you either do it before the time or after. And that's why many of us are granting interviews such as this before the event. Of course, in the first part of the campaign, you can still use social media during that period. But if our demands are not met, we would have to take things a notch higher. And that might then include not using data. So we'll see how it goes. We can't also publicly divulge everything about the campaign. What I can say is that it's a well-organized campaign. You have some of the best brains and the best activists involved, and many organizations are logging into it.
I've seen that there are some artworks going around.
Yes.
People are putting it on their status.
Exactly.
So it's all part of it as well.
It's part of it.
In looking at the issues relating to the entire SIM registration process, I'm just wondering, are you and your colleagues willing to lose your SIM cards if by the 31st of March, many have still refused to undertake the process? Have you undertaken the process yet?
No, please. I haven't.
You don't plan
I haven't
to?
subjected myself to the indignity of queuing and undertaking essentially what I consider to be an illegal exercise.
So you will not be undertaking the SIM registration exercise?
No, please.
So what happens on the 31st of March?
I think that by the time this campaign is even halfway, a resolution to this matter would be secured. As I said, it's not opposite to reveal an entire strategy just on air. You know how activism is. You have to keep some of the things to yourself and just roll it out if you want it to have maximum effect.
But let's face it, maybe the current cell phone number you use is a legacy number. Probably you're like me, you've used your number for the last, maybe 15 years or more. Do you want to lose that? Because if you lose that number nonetheless, you still need to keep your SIM active and you'll need to get another one. You still have to go through the process.
Jifa, one of the reasons why governments and businesses are successful in trampling on the rights of citizens is because we are always struggling not to lose something. Citizens must come to the point where they are willing to lose something in order to gain more. If you go to countries that have been ravaged by civil war and all that, you would realize that a number is nothing to give up. in order to maintain a democracy and a civil society that keeps the country intact. What is a number? And if we continue holding on to the little conveniences that we want to keep and not give up, we would end up giving up the country, and that would be worse. So I'm calling on people, suffer the minimal discomfort of not making a call, of not receiving a call, at some point of not using data, or of even losing your number, in order to secure our constitutionalism and our democracy.
Now, there's an aspect to this whole conversation that I don't know if you've been minded, but I would like to raise it. And part of this whole SIM registration is also that it's a very gendered issue. For many men, they're keeping their normal names from the time they were born till date. And so they go in and do the registry. But there are many women, and I have encountered that, who've gone to the NIA trying to update their NIA cards because they are using it in their maiden name, they are married, or they registered the SIM in their married name and they are having a maiden name. And I mean, I've seen the, should I say, confusion that has been brokered because of this, or the confusion that has emerged as a result. So I'm just wondering, is that something that has, come to your attention?
It has come to the attention of the campaign, and it's been discussed. And this is just an example of the many things that should have been done in preparation for the exercise. And that's why I don't believe that everything has been streamlined legally, technically, and administratively for this process to proceed. If it had been done, this issue would have been thought about and mechanisms put in place to address it, and effective communication gone out to the Ghanaian public on how it should be addressed. That hasn't been done.
Finally, there's a parliamentary committee on communications. There's only been one major individual who's been very vocal about this, and that's the Honorable Sam George, who's been critical of this. In fact, he said it would be illegal for any of the telcos to cancel anybody's SIM card because this is a violation of their right to ownership.
Yes.
Okay.
To property.
Property, yes. And I'm just wondering, is that beyond, he's been doing a lot of advocacy, is there anything that can be done through Parliament, through this committee, in reference to this SIM registration process?
Yes. As you know, Parliament has a constitutional duty to oversight the executive. And I believe this morning or so, there's a news report where the minority leader is requesting that the Minister for Communication comes to Parliament to answer for all of these issues and to respond to the type of questions that you're posing in this interview.
But is there realistically anything the committee can do? The ministry seems to be in full flight together with its agencies.
I think that Parliament in the last 30 years has not, as we say in Ghana, flexed its muscles enough, and that if they really wanted to, they could get this process done. First suspended, thought through, reorganized, made legal, and done with dignity. Parliament can't do that. There are many, many processes both in the 1992 Constitution and in the standing orders of Parliament for that to be done. Parliament can hold the minister in contempt if she doesn't do certain things that are mandated for her to do. Even the Constitution provides for a situation where Parliament can pass a vote of no confidence in the President, and the President has to step down. But Parliament doesn't seem to be using its powers as outlined in the Constitution and in the standing orders. And it's about time they did that.
Finally, your final words on the no-call day planned for the 8th of February.
I would like to call on Ghanaians to start living as citizens and not as subjects. This is our motherland. We need to be treated with dignity in our motherland. And we are not going to allow any private entity to push us around, capture our biometric data without any legal basis, and utilize it for whatever purposes they want to utilize it. This country is a country of laws. If you want to undertake an exercise such as this, you must be legislatively mandated to do so. If you are not, don't do it. If you believe in this as a Ghanaian, then you would switch your phone, not switch your phone off, you would not make any call and not receive any call on no calls day from 6 a.m. to 12 noon.
But there's no proof that the data being collected might be used for any ulterior motive.
We can't wait for the data to be collected before we decide on the protocols for managing the integrity and safety and security of the data. That must be done before the data is collected. So all safety and security and integrity processes must antedate the collection of the data and not post-date it. Once the data is collected, literally we lose control unless the parameters have been preset for where the data is going, how it will be secured, how it can be retrieved. That's all we are asking for.
It doesn't give you any comfort that the NCA, the Ministry for Communication, and the Chamber of Telecoms had come together to discuss how they can ensure that the process is smoother and that, of course, people are not left standing in the sun and struggling. That doesn't give you any comfort that at least now when you see people at the centers, they are seated in a dignified manner and all that.
But Jifa, we're not a country of discussions, we're a country of laws. So just by meeting and discussing and putting out in the media that everything is okay, doesn't make things okay. No, they said
they are working towards improving the process.
Yes, that's not okay. We need to see the legislative basis for infringing on the rights of Ghanaians as enshrined in Articles 18 and 21 of our Constitution. And second, we need for anybody who has been legislatively mandated to undertake this exercise to do so in accordance with Article 15 of our Constitution, which says that the dignity of every person is inviolable.
Thank you very much, Professor Raymond Atuguba. Our guest on First Take has been Professor Raymond Atuguba there, sharing his perspectives about the ongoing SIM registration exercise and particularly about the No Calls campaign planned for the 8th of February. I'm Jifa Bampo. Thank you for watching. Till next time.